All right, good morning and welcome to our discussion of Greater Texas Foundation's new philanthropic strategy that will guide our work for the next 5 years. We appreciate all of you for taking the time to join us, and we thank you for your partnership in supporting Texas students. Our goals for this webinar are to provide context for the strategic plan and respond to questions you may have. I'll begin by introducing the GTF staff members who have a hand in the Foundation's programs and grants. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the strategic planning process and resulting plan. Our Grants Management Associate will take you through an overview of our grant-making process, and then we'll use the rest of the time to answer questions. You'll notice you are currently muted. If you have questions as we go along, please type them in the chat box and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. If you have questions about a specific concept or a question very specific to your organization, we may want to follow up with those after the webinar. I'd also like to mention that we're recording this webinar and we'll make it available on our website for reference. Now I'll get started with some quick introductions. I'll start with myself, Leslie Garola. I am Director of Programs and Strategy and have been with GTF for a little more than 12 years. My primary role is to ensure the Foundation's grant making aligns with the strategic direction set by our Board of Directors. I'll now pass it over to our CEO, Sue McMillan.
Unmuted.
Good morning. I'm Sue McMillan. I'm Greater Texas Foundation's President and CEO, and my role here is to develop and implement strategy and oversee the operations of the organization in conjunction with our Board of Directors and our staff.
Good morning. My name is Allison Pennington. I'm the Programs and Strategy Associate for Greater Texas Foundation. Been here for about 3 years, and I get to work closely with Leslie in implementing programs and strategy here at the Foundation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Woodruff, and I'm the Grants Management Associate here at GTF. Along with our Director of Grants Management, Carol Miller, my role is to administer several aspects of our grant-making process, including organizing concept and proposal review, performing due diligence analyses, processing payments and reports, and also helping to maintain the integrity of our database.
Thanks, everybody. One of my favorite parts about this job is getting to work with this team. We truly try to be available to help in whatever way we can, so please don't hesitate to contact us when you need to. As the next part of the webinar, I'll turn it over to Sue now to give some brief background on the Foundation and our planning process.
Greater Texas Foundation is a private foundation based in Bryan, Texas. We pay out about $10 million a year in grants, and we are focused on post-secondary student success across the state of Texas. Our grant making is guided by a strategic plan that helps us leverage our resources as effectively as possible, and we revisit and update our plan every 5 years. We began our most recent planning process in January of 2019 with the help of the consulting firm Education First. Education First assessed the current educational landscape in Texas by analyzing current data, interviewing stakeholders, and visiting 5 regions of the state. Some of you may have participated in this research, and we're very grateful to you for your input. Based on the team's findings, we then went through an iterative process with our Board of Directors to develop strategy. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but I want to emphasize here that the most important outcome of this work has been to renew our commitment to our mission, ensuring all Texas students are prepared for, have access to, persist in, and complete post-secondary education. We continue to be particularly interested in efforts to support students who are traditionally have been underserved, and we continue to use a variety of approaches, including partnerships and knowledge building, to maximize the impact of our grant making. To set the stage for the new strategy, Allison is going to review some of the key data points that have shaped our approach.
We learned a lot from the research Education First shared with us. Today, I'm just going to share a few highlights that really stood out to us as we tried to decide how best to use the Foundation's resources over the next 5 years. So we'll start with the big picture. If you follow a group of 8th graders in Texas for 10 years, so that's enough time to complete high school and then 6 more years to go as far as a bachelor's degree, you'll find that only 22 out of every 100 students will complete any kind of post-secondary credential in that time frame. And the completion rate is even lower for low-income students and students of color overall. That's concerning because it doesn't reflect the full potential of our students, and it also doesn't line up with the needs of our workforce. So as we went through strategic planning, we knew that no matter what we decided to do, we at the Foundation wanted our efforts to help increase this number. It's also important to keep in mind that Texas's colleges and universities are serving a larger number of students than ever before, and higher education is also more diverse than ever before. For example, 65% of the state's post-secondary students are students of color, and more than half receive a Pell Grant to help finance their education. We also know students are increasingly entering higher education from a variety of different points, not just coming straight in from high school. So as we thought about what we wanted to do for the next 5 years, we knew we wanted to help make sure that institutions are ready to meet the needs of all their students, whoever they might be. So now if you start focusing in to find out what is keeping students from completing a credential, you'll find that transition points are critical. For example, right now only 65% of public high school graduates enroll directly in a Texas institution of higher education right after they finish high school. We also know that only 20% of community college students who are enrolled in a program designed for transfer actually do successfully make that transfer and finish a credential within 6 years. We heard over and over again from the field during the research process that many students fall off track because of inadequate advising or limited or confusing pathways, as well as the significant expenses that come along with pursuing a college degree. So based on that feedback, we wanted to dedicate part of our work to providing students with a seamless, affordable pathway to a credential. As in the past, the Foundation continues to be very interested in outcomes for Texas's rural students. We have more rural students than any other state in the nation. Now, good data on this population are hard to come by. It's not something that's reported on as often as we would like to see, but we do know that rural students perform very well academically. They graduate high school on par with their peers in other areas of the state, but they are less likely to participate in college prep activities like, for example, taking the SAT or the ACT. And they often encounter extra challenges when it comes to entering higher education and persisting and completing. So helping rural communities support their students so they can achieve their post-secondary goals is another fundamental part of our strategy. Finally, we learned that math continues to be a barrier for far too many students seeking a post-secondary credential. With just under half of high school graduates meeting college and career readiness standards in math, we have a large number of students who are struggling to complete the college-level math coursework they need for the degree they want. And we also see institutions who are working to adapt their curriculum and instruction to make sure students are taking the math that makes the most sense for the pathway they're on, but it's easier said than done, and continued support is needed for those efforts. So the research told us we needed to continue moving the needle on math for college success in Texas. So with those points in mind, Leslie's going to walk us through the strategy we developed to address these needs.
Thanks, Allison. You should see on your screen a high-level snapshot of our strategic plan. You can also view this on our website at greatertexasfoundation.org by clicking on the Strategy tab. I welcome you to do that if you would like to take a deeper dive into the specific strategies behind these 4 goals. If you follow GTF's work over the years, you'll notice that this strategy is truly an evolution of where we have been. We are very proud of the final outcome, and to Sue's point, we thank those on this webinar who participated in the planning process. Your insight and feedback mattered greatly to what you see here as the final product. The first thing I'll mention is the overarching theory of change. GTF invests in student-centered solutions so more Texans can achieve their post-secondary goals. I really appreciate having this overarching statement above the goal statements to always keep us true to thinking about the students. If you look across the goals, and I'll get to those in a minute, you'll see a lot of words like systems, policy, communities, models, Those are great, and we should be thinking at that level, but I like having a statement to ground us and always thinking about how does this work ultimately impact Texas students. So as part of the plan, we have 4 goals, and each goal has an impact statement associated with. So we believe that if we do our work well, we'll achieve the impacts outlined under each of the goals. I'll start with student supports. Sustainable, data-driven change so secondary and post-secondary education systems can effectively serve students of all backgrounds to completion. If you look at the impact, we believe that if we do our work well, more Texas students will complete certificates and degrees leading to living wage jobs, particularly students of color, adult learners, and low-income students. If you go to the next goal, transfer, transition, and advising, and I would even shorten that more by saying this is the clear pathways goal. So what are the policies and practices that provide affordable, clear, and efficient post-secondary pathways for students? Making sure we get those right. What I'll highlight here are a couple things. One thing is affordability was something that during all of our conversations about how the foundation would move forward with its plan, affordability was something that kept coming up as highly critical. And so this is really about not only ensuring that students have clear pathways to post-secondary credentials, but also that they have affordable clear pathways to post-secondary credentials. I'll also mention here that this is the goal where we're really looking for partnerships between post-secondary and secondary systems. The third goal, rural collaborations, is around partnerships with rural communities to build supports for students. What we're looking for here, our ultimate impact, is for students in rural regions to have the academic resources, guidance, and support necessary to complete a post-secondary credential. This, if you've been familiar with Greater Texas Foundation's work, rural is something that we focused on for several years. This is truly an evolution of where we've been. What's changed, I think, is the way we're talking about it, thinking more about rural collaborations. And that really has to do with sustainability. So there's just a recognition that we can't achieve true success in rural communities without community partners coming together to think about what changes could be lasting and sustainable for their students. And so that's why we call out collaborations here specifically. And the last goal, Math for Success, is also a continuation of our previous work. This is about sustainable math education models designed to drive post-secondary completion. And what we're really looking for here is making sure that students are on the right math path to achieve their post-secondary goals, and that math doesn't become instead a barrier for them in the post-secondary goals. And that's why we focus on mathematics specifically as an academic component to our strategic planning process. If you look across the bottom of this screen, you'll see our strategies. Again, this is a high-level overview of the strategies we'll engage to work toward those goal statements. And also, again, if you click on the highlighted text of the goals or the drop-down menu on the website, the drop-down menu from the Strategies tab, you can review the specific strategies behind each goal. I won't read every line to you today, but one thing I'd like to point out is that research and knowledge building are strategic priorities under each goal. That is something that has been and continues to be important to GTF. And in fact, we are developing a learning agenda associated with each goal that will continue to finesse over the next several months. And we've already reached out to some of you who are on this webinar to help with that. In addition, as part of the strategic planning process, we develop a set of activities and metrics to go along with each goal. The activities will vary and may evolve over time, but as an example, you will likely see us doing more convening around these issue areas as part of this 5-year plan. We have such smart, committed partners who can really look at these issues from multiple perspectives, including research, policy, and practice. We want to be sure we are being a partner and doing what we can to bring people and organizations together to learn, share, and ultimately increase impact. I'll now pass it over to my colleague Chris to discuss our grant cycle and elaborate a bit on the metrics I mentioned.
Thanks, Leslie. Looking at the flowchart of GTF's grant making process, I think the most important message for all of you is that very little is changing with the launch of our new strategic plan in terms of the process. For those of you on the call who have worked with GTF in the past, I think you'll probably see a process here that you recognize. And for those of you who are new to working with GTF, I hope you'll see that this process is pretty simple and straightforward. Today, I'm just going to discuss the process from a pretty general perspective. So if you come away from the webinar with more specific questions, my suggestion is that you first visit our website, go to the grant application and review page, where we've provided a more detailed explanation, and you might also check out our frequently asked questions page. So again, our process is pretty simple. Starting with the first step, step one is essentially contact Leslie to discuss whether your project idea is a strong fit for us. We'll share Leslie's contact information at the end of the webinar. Step two, if it's a strong fit, you'll be invited to submit a concept paper, which is essentially a brief application that allows us to better assess your proposed project. For step three, after staff review, strong concepts will be invited to submit a full proposal. And this is where the biggest change from our previous process happens, and I'll come back to that with a few more details momentarily. Step four, we will, as this states pretty clearly, we'll issue grant agreements to organizations if and when GTF's board approves their full proposal. And then finally, in step five, monitoring will be our typical reporting requirements at 6-month intervals, plus the new component of quantitative data tracking, which I'm about to talk about and that Leslie alluded to a few minutes ago. So if I can, circling back quickly to the concept paper stage, I want to alert you to one other small change, and that's just that if your program or project is a potential fit and you're invited to submit a concept paper, you'll submit that paper through our new online application system beginning at the beginning of next year, beginning of 2020, that is. So you'll be given the opportunity to activate an account in that system at the time that you're invited to submit a concept. And it's important also to point out that even returning applicants, those who have been funded by GTF before, will need to register in our new system at the time that you receive your concept paper invitation. Now back to the proposal stage. So in addition to answering the full proposal questions, this is the stage at which a new element in our grant making process comes into play, and that is the data tracking for project monitoring and evaluation that I mentioned previously. So under our new strategic plan, GTF seeks to better understand the impact of each of our grantees and the combined impact of the Foundation's grant making in the areas of our 4 major goals, which Leslie previously explained. To facilitate this, we've developed a set of standard quantitative metrics paired with each of the 4 GTF goals. These metrics will focus on measuring impact, influence, and leverage. During the proposal stage, we'll ask applicants to indicate to us which of the standard metrics that they will be able to track and report on during the execution of their project. Additionally, all applicants will work with GTF staff to propose 4 of their own custom assessment metrics to track throughout their project. These might be impact measures that your organization already tracks, or they might be new data points that you'd like to begin tracking for enhanced organizational learning. For GTF, this is all about a new focus on our institutional learning, and we look forward to what we can learn together with you about the impact, influence, and leverage produced in part through our grants. With that being said, we realize that the capacity of different grant applicants will vary in many ways, so we want to reassure you that our approach to monitoring and evaluation will be flexible and collaborative to mesh with the capabilities of each organization. Now, coming back to the proposal process, just want to point out that proposals are first reviewed by Foundation staff and then by our board's Charitable Activities Committee, which will either recommend it for approval to the full board or the committee will decide to decline the application. So once a final determination has been made, GTF staff will notify the applicant. From start to finish, we expect this process to take a minimum of 3 months, but it can be highly variable depending on various circumstances. Finally, moving now to the monitoring stage, the major change from our previous reporting format, as you may have expected, will be the addition of these reporting on these quantitative metrics, both the standard metrics and the custom assessment metrics. And these are things that each applicant will have agreed to track as part of their proposal. So grantees should definitely plan for collecting the necessary data and reporting against these metrics throughout their project. To close, I'd just like to mention that GTF really enjoys keeping up with the ongoing work of our grantees and maintaining relationships with all of you. So even beyond the GTF grant period, it's possible that we may reach out to follow up on any continuing outcomes and impacts that you're seeing in your work as it progresses following the GTF grant. And we certainly hope that you'll be open to continuing that collaboration with us.
Thanks, Chris. We'll now take questions. Please include your questions in the chat box. And again, if you have questions about a specific concept or a question very specific to your organization, we'll want to follow up with those after the webinar, and my contact info is on the next slide. To the extent we have answers today, we're happy to respond to questions related to the strategic planning process and plan here. And I did see one question come up about research RFPs. And one thing I'll say about that is that as I mentioned, it's part of the strategic plan slide. We do have a learning agenda that we're working on with very specific learning and research questions associated with each goal. It's likely that, you know, as we're implementing the plan, if we see have a question that really there's a gap in the literature on, we may develop RFPs to go along with specific research questions. But a second part to that answer is that research concepts are also able to come in through our traditional process that Chris just outlined at any time. And so if you have a research idea or question you'd like to have a conversation about, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to have that conversation when you're ready to have the conversation. And we'll just, how does the foundation prioritize research versus service? To answer that question, I'll just, I think we don't have specific allocations, if you will, toward direct service or research. It's really about making sure that we have a balance across our portfolio where we're addressing each of the goals in different ways that align with the strategies. Our responsibility as a staff is to make sure that we're bringing things to our board that are aligned with the strategy, that are supportive of the goals, and that really take things from multiple perspectives. And so there's not a set percentage per se, but we're really looking at tackling these goals from multiple issue areas. From multiple perspectives. One question is, do you encourage potential grantees to include a formal program project evaluation component into their plans? Does GTF consider these as compatible to its research strategy? So there's a couple of also answers to that question. And I may ask Allison or Chris if you all have thoughts to this question too, but I'll get started. The first thought is that, as Chris mentioned, we are really looking at metrics. And so even if there's not a third-party evaluation associated with a particular grant, which is something that the foundation may support depending on the proposal, we are looking for how the grantee organization itself is monitoring success across its grant internally. And we have ways, as Chris mentioned, to help with that. And yes, if there's programmatic work and there is a research question or an evaluation associated with it, that could be tied to our learning agenda and would actually be something that we might be looking for as part of the proposal process. I'm going to pause and see if Chris or Allison or Sue have anything to add to that question. And I think there's a second part, but I'm going to see if they have anything to add to this first.
This is Allison. Leslie, I think that sums it up well. I would just, reiterate that we're always looking for opportunities to learn and inform the field, but we want to always ask first, what's the purpose of the evaluation? So we don't want to ask for information that's not going to benefit the organization and is not going to add to what we already know. But if there are questions out there that can be answered through a formal evaluation, then we certainly encourage that and are happy to support it.
Yes, and there's a couple other questions related to evaluation. What are the characteristics of a grant that should include a formal evaluation component? And I'll say we don't have a set idea of what type of grant should include that component. That's something that typically an applicant has something in mind already that they would like to have as part of the proposal. So they have the evaluation component in mind. It may be internal or external, and that's part of the proposal. The second part is we'll have those set metrics that we're looking at and requiring as part of the process. And then the third answer is that there may be a proposal that comes in where when it comes to the foundation, we really see a need for an evaluation because of the type of work that will be occurring as a result of the grant. And so that we may ask applicants to think about adjusting their concept or proposal to include that component into their work. And again, I think this next question, should an individual proposal have both components, goes back to it really depends on what's being composed, but there is a baseline that we'll be expecting as part of all concepts and proposals in this plan, and that's those metrics that Chris talked about. These are great questions. Thank you. We'll give a couple more seconds for any other questions. The metrics are not posted to the website. And Chris, do you want to answer that question with a little bit more context?
Absolutely. So as Leslie said, the metrics are not posted on the web, and we anticipate rolling those metrics out to each applicant individually as they get to the proposal stage. And so we don't anticipate posting those anywhere for you to see ahead of the proposal stage.
But if you're interested and want to have a conversation about them, again, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have specific questions about the metrics or the type of metrics that are included. All right, we'll give another couple seconds for any burning questions. And in the meantime, Allison, can you go ahead and switch it to the last slide so my contact information is up? Thank you. This is my email address and the office phone number. If you have any additional questions about the strategic plan, about Greater Texas Foundation, about any of our work, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we really try to be open, transparent, communicative, and so please feel free to reach out. We thank all of you for your partnership, and seeing no other questions, give you back 30 minutes of your morning. Thank you everyone who took time to listen in this morning. Have a good day.